Well. They actually did it. They actually really did it this time. Of all companies, Netflix of all companies actually proved my hating ass wrong. As you guessed it, the rumors are true. The live action curse is finally broken, and the One Piece live action really is a banger. It's Tired here, and today we're going to be doing an all-encompassing review and breakdown of the One Piece live action series. This will probably be a bit of a long one since I have a lot to say about the One Piece live action, so there will be timestamps in the comment section if you want to skip to a part that you actually want to learn about. But if you want to stick around for the entire length of the whole video, then be my guest, man. I need the watch time. And with all of that being said, let's get started to the actual meat and potatoes. Now, when speaking of all the great things that the One Piece live action has graced us on the television, or the computer in my case, we have to talk about the actual quality or high quality set designs and backgrounds that they used. Cause man, goddamn. Like we saw from the original trailer, we saw that the set design was actually pretty well thought out, and as an audience, you can tell that a lot of time, effort, and planning went into each and every background that was used in the show. Every single scene is just eye-catching, and each set is not really ever the same or similar, which just adds that little bit of a flavor into every single individual scene, which just can be appreciated by every single type of audience out there watching the show, from the diehards to the first-timers. Even with my limited knowledge, I could tell that some of these sets are almost identical or similar to the stuff in the manga and anime, and the two sets that really stand out to me that look really good were Shellstown and the Barati Naval Restaurant, that almost looked one for one from what I can remember. And honestly, yeah, the set designers and the production team really shine through in this section of the production, especially in the attention to detail for each and every background. Once again, big round of applause. You definitely didn't skimp out on the budget on this one. You really showed out. And of course, after the set design is in question, we have to talk about probably the one thing you really care about as an audience: the acting. Now, the acting all round was a lot better than I thought it would ever be, especially for a live action anime adaptation. And honestly, within the main cast, the actors for Luffy, Nami, and Sanji really popped off during the production and just acted their asses off. Inaki Godoy actually pulled off the Luffy role pretty damn near perfectly, or at least as close as you can without actually being Luffy in some way. I think when the trailer reaction video dropped, I mentioned how Inaki Godoy kind of just like embodied every single thing about Luffy in his mannerisms, the way he talks, down to even how he naturally looks. And during the entire runtime of the show, he kept that consistently throughout every single episode. Personally speaking, I don't know where they found this guy, but Inaki Godoy as the role of Luffy, I can't see anyone else like outperforming him in this role specifically. Well, actually maybe Guava Juice, but you know, he's not an actor. Emily Rudd as the actor for Nami was actually a very pleasant surprise during the runtime of the One Piece live action. Out of all the actors in the main cast, I personally thought that Emily Rudd probably portrayed her character in Nami the best out of the bunch. Like, honestly, she probably is one of my favorite actors in the main cast, apart from maybe one other character that we'll talk about later. When it comes to acting, when she portrayed emotions such as concern, anger, sadness, etc., you can really feel those emotions through her acting performances as Nami. This is all while consistently keeping the personality and character archetype which is Nami in the entire runtime of the show. And I really think her acting performances and skill actually shined when she was acting as Nami, when she was conflicted in between working with the Straw Hats and her friends versus Arlong to complete her deal, and especially when Arlong betrayed her at the start of episode 8, and you know, her performances really made it convincing that she actually played out Nami in that situation. Her acting really conveyed the emotions of Nami of feeling pain and grief, and especially during the betrayal scene when Nami as an independent character finally breaks down and shows her true emotions. Her acting really just made the scene a lot more powerful. At the end of the day, your role as an actor really just boils down to you understanding your character to a deep fundamental level, the point where you can convince the audience that you are them in the production and no one else. And honestly, Nami and Emily Rudd, I have no complaints at all, just overall. great acting. Now, Taz Skylar as Sanji was probably the biggest surprise in the entire production of the One Piece live action. His acting was a lot better than I thought it would be, especially when looking back at the trailer. I think they kind of did him a little dirty, and honestly, I'm sorry my guy, the British kind of threw me off for Sanji a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. He really played the role of the suave waiter slash chef really well, and his line deliveries and performances really showed out. His acting of certain emotions and particular scenes really hooked me onto his character really early on into the Bharati arc, and honestly, he's probably one of my favorite characters in the entire show as well. Personally, when I want to measure a actor's true latent abilities and skill, I always like to look at how they perform in very tense and emotional situations within a film production. And at the end of the Bharati arc, even though sometimes it's easy to make me emotional during a film, the ending between Chef Zeph and Sanji actually moved me quite a bit, I'm not gonna lie. That was a pretty good ending scene. Now, on to the other characters. And for now, I'm gonna save the best for last and talk about my guy Usopp first. Now, overall, I think Jacob Gibson actually did a pretty good job playing as Usopp within live action. I think he actually really embodied the personality traits of Usopp pretty well, and his little comedic quips and lines here and there were actually pretty good. I think the actor really shined through the most when Usopp's more jolly and happy side came out, like when he tells a story or just generally when he fucks around in the show. However, when the more serious stuff comes around, especially when he's acting as he's scared, man, those line deliveries, man, they just don't hit. One scene that really stood out for me was when Captain Kuro ambushes both him and Zoro in the wine cellar, and Usopp falls over because he found Mary's lifeless body. I'm sorry my guy, but the whole stuttering and acting scared part did not sell me at all. Zoro, it's Mary. Man, you don't shut your... But honestly, overall though, great work. It's just those parts kind of throw me off sometimes, if you know what I mean. Now last, but absolutely not least, we have Mackenyu playing Roronoa Zoro in the live action. Now, if you saw my reaction to the trailer, you definitely would notice that I was incredibly critical of Mackenyu's actual portrayal of Zoro as a character, being really edgy and all. But man, I'm not gonna lie, this new personality they thought up and cooked up for the series, man, it grew on me past episode 1, I'm not gonna lie. I think the best way to describe Zoro's personality in the show is Sasuke Uchiha, but if he was dumb as hell. He would hit you with I just shit my pants, or some other edgy line with the utmost amount of riz possible, trying to riz up the entire audience, man. Of course, some scenes are kind of cringe, like when he popped out on the whole buggy scene saying, "Oh, I am Roronoa Zoro." Now, overall, acting was pretty good. When the emotional scenes come around, Mackenyu does pull out and actually give us what we need as an audience in those scenes. Honestly, it's just super fun to really watch Zoro on the screen, in this personality type. Now moving on to probably my favorite part of One Piece so far, and that is the villains and extras. The villains of One Piece were actually incredible in terms of acting, and I just loved how each and every one of the villains actually felt villainous, if that's an actual word. I loved how Buggy really played into that evil clown aesthetic, where he basically was just the Joker in some One Piece cosplay at points. He actually felt like an insane circus freak show, and when the evil side kind of subsided and he played more into the comedic role of the show, he actually executed it pretty well as well. Out of all the villains though, I think that Captain Kuro was probably my favorite amongst all of them, because man, his line delivery was just chef's kiss magnifique, if you know what I mean. His character actually feels ruthless, evil, and just downright cruel in the way he delivers his lines. And I think it really showed out when they had this whole slasher film-esque scene where he's kind of just stabbing through walls, cutting up the walls, slashing through furniture, and his whole monologue just, wow, it made me hyped. I'm just telling you right now, that was probably one of my favorite scenes in the entire show. Finally, Arlong was probably as expected. I didn't feel any way strongly about how he performed. He performed up to par, good, just generally. And I might need a second watch since this is like the day after I just watched it and I finished up on like episode 8 at what 12 a.m. So it's a bit fresh in my mind right now. I might need a second watch to really like sink in my ideas about it. But yeah, honestly, Arlong was just good in my opinion. Not much to say apart from that. Now, other notable characters I'd like to shout out are Kobe, Garp, Helmeppo, Mihawk, Young Nami, Chef Zeph, and how little we saw of him. Shanks was pretty awesome as well. And I'm kind of just cutting this section a little short because of runtime, because this bit long already. But all the actors in this small excerpt were pretty damn good, and I think portrayed their original characters either incredibly well or damn near perfect in some aspects. Now, to wrap up all the rest of the good stuff that we saw in the live-action One Piece, we have to talk about the smaller production aspects of the live-action, such as the costumes, the CGI, and the small editing touches they added to spice up the show a little bit. Now, generally, the outfits and costumes of the live action One Piece were actually pretty good. They were generally accurate to the actual source material outfits, down to even the hairstyling and makeup, which is a big shout out to the makeup team and costume team. Also, an even bigger shout out to the person who did the Arlong Park fisherman costumes. Those were pretty damn good when I first saw them. Of course, there's going to be some rough patches here and there in the costume department because One Piece is animated kind of weirdly, and when you try to make Arlong kind of materialize in human form for the live action, you know, that's probably not going to look the best. Or rather, a human look like Arlong, but you know, however you want to spin it. Now, the CGI was definitely a lot better than I thought it would be. The quality is something reminiscent of a decently high-budget Hollywood production. Of course, definitely not in the level of like a Marvel or Avatar, but definitely decent enough to the point where it kind of just blows all the other live action anime adaptations out of the water. I think the CGI quality was probably the best when a fight involving Luffy happens. The CGI was actually dynamic and well done to the point where when Luffy whips out a move, it just doesn't look like absolute garbage. I think the best example of this would be in the final fight between Luffy and Arlong when he whips out Gomu Gomu no Battle Axe. I think it looked pretty damn good, and I'm not gonna lie, that scene did get me pretty hyped. And I also think that the CG especially showed out in like pretty much every scene that Buggy was in, because you know, his disassociation was done pretty seamlessly and looks pretty good for the most part, even when he's literally just ahead as well. The final good thing I want to talk about in the One Piece live action is the really small, fine editing touches they added in here and there for the audience. You know, like the title sequence and the wanted posters appearing on screen. First off, I really like the little attention to detail in the title sequence where the producers changed the O in One Piece to a themed skull of the main character in focus, or one of the main characters in focus in the episode itself. I really love stuff like this because it really shows that the producers actually care about the product they're actually giving you, since they're caring so much about the small things, and it shows you that they also care about the source material and fandom they're also working with. The second little editing touch I really liked was the wanted posters appearing on screen and the small little fourth wall breaks they used to transition it to the actual scene itself. The poster would sort of like fly into frame in some way with like a little fire animation for the bounties and berries, and the enemy would sort of transition it into the actual scene itself in like a fourth wall breaky way, if you know what I mean. Stuff like this, like I mentioned, is greatly appreciated from the audience and just shows you that the producer actually cares. You know, these little things are underappreciated, so I just wanted to show a little appreciation for the stuff. Now, with all the good stuff aside, we gotta move on to the bad, or my criticisms, or rather criticism. And if you could tell from the trailer, and honestly, if you watch the show, there's some little nitpicky things I want to point out in the fight scenes. Now, in terms of the fight scenes, I think overall they look pretty damn good. Overall, I think the fight and action choreography was pretty dynamic and fluid for the most part, and entertaining, which is probably most important of all. I especially liked it when they whipped out the hand-to-hand combat and swordplay action sequences, where it was incredibly fast-paced, fluid, dynamic, and honestly just looked like a dance at times, to be honest. But of course, this wouldn't be a criticism section without any criticism. And I just noticed that in some of these action sequences, there's just that one little itty bitty moment that just throws me off and kind of just grinds my gears when I see it. Like, the action sequence would look so good, and there'd just be that one moment, like Sanji flying into frame, like kind of just sliding into frame and kicking someone in the air, like we saw in the trailer, and a moment like when Zoro runs around the chair to run up a wall just to kick somebody. And I'm not even gonna forget, like, the fish people jumping out of the water in the Arlong Park section looked pretty, you know, iffy as well. Like, the action sequences just look so good, and there's just that one moment for like a split second that you're just like, damn, you know? Now, I can tell you guys are probably screaming at the screen right now, like, bro, that's just a nitpick. It's not actually a criticism. But man, you gotta cut me some slack here. I had to have something in the criticism section, and you know, not every show can be perfect. Hey, that's all I can say. Now, this final gray area criticism that I'm gonna bring up is something I just straight up don't agree with, but I'm sure it will come up to the people looking to criticize the live action One Piece series. And it is the fact that the live action actually alters the main storyline quite a bit. Now, if you notice as an audience, you will definitely realize that the production team definitely cut out or altered certain sections of the main storyline for runtime and budget purposes. Now, for all of the One Piece purists out there, I'm sure this is a main criticism you have. And to be fair, I'm just assuming that you guys exist out there, but I feel like this criticism is completely unwarranted. For one, everyone kind of expected these cuts to happen because you can't just make a 8-episode adaptation out of a full 1,000-ish chapter series. But I think more importantly, the changes they made, whether it be big or small, were executed incredibly well. For the most part, I think the production team and script writing team actually did a really good job in analyzing the original story and cutting out the filler parts or the unnecessary parts of the main storyline to condense it into a concise story for one episode. For example, the Syrup Village arc was heavily altered. I think like almost half of the entire thing was altered, where they straight up changed the way the Straw Hat Pirates figured out Captain Kuro was a bad guy. They condensed Usopp's origin story in his village, and even just straight up changed the setting where the main fight occurs in the main story. While they changed most of the story and how things sort of happen, they still kept the core concepts and ideas of the source material while also keeping the main fight still intact in the show as well. And most importantly, they kept this particular arc in budget, entertaining, concise, and similar. There's also another thing I kind of really liked about the story composition of the live action One Piece, how they kind of took the idea of world building and sort of implemented it somehow in the One Piece live action, which was really cool since, you know, world building is one of the main core aspects of the One Piece series. But I think I'll save that for another short video later on in the week or month. You know how my upload schedule is. Now, personally, I would be hard pressed to just straight up add this section to the good parts of One Piece. But like I mentioned before, it's sort of in this gray area at the moment. So, you know, I'll just leave it there for now in this gray area section. But, you know, masterful work in my opinion. I think they did an incredible job. Overall, if you couldn't tell from the entire runtime of this One Piece reaction / review, of course, I think the show is an absolute banger. I have to say, it did really make me eat my words in my original One Piece trailer reaction. And if you haven't watched that yet, the link is in the description. So if you want to watch my initial reaction, you can roast me all you want in the comment section. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.